Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Radiator Arms, not road legal, in California. Take it away, Will.
At the Radiator Arms, at the Radiator Arms. Come on, son, let's have some fun at the Radiator Arms. Radiator Arms.
Yay! Do we have a jingle, he says. All right, everybody. Welcome to the Radiator Arms, the car-centric corner of your favorite imaginary pub. I am James of JM on Cars. I am joined as ever by the man in the cans and on the acoustic guitar, Will.
The Plank.
Also of JM and Friends and SPORTZNTOURING, the mighty Ant.
Hello.
And today, joining us, another special guest. It's Ant's son, Damani.
Hello.
Now, Damani, welcome to the Radiator Arms. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Today's episode really is inspired by a suggestion that you had, which is, as a younger gentleman, and you're how old right now?
26.
26, remember those days well. They're getting slightly faded in the memory, but I can just about hold on to them. It's getting harder, I think, to be a car enthusiast. In fact, it's getting harder to get into cars full stop, even if you're not enthusiastic about them. So today's session is going to be a little bit of a talk to yourself about what you're into, a bit of your past, but also what people can do to get into interesting cars, which interesting cars are still out there on a reasonable budget, and hopefully to prove that there is still hope out there and decent cars do still exist at a good price. So give us a little bit of background on yourself. What was your first car?
Wow. My first car was a 2000 Mark IV Golf, 1.4 litre, 75 horsepower. It was horrible. It was terrible. I worked very hard for nearly a year at a pub to buy my first car. It cost me £980. It had been very untastefully modified with a show cage that was held in by 3 wood screws, John Blue Line coilovers, the eBay specials, an exhaust that fell off after a week of me driving the car, and an alignment that meant that I was permanently crabbing down the roads. I mostly demodified the car the day I brought it back home. But yeah, that was my first car. I loved it, and it blew up after 3 months.
Brilliant.
It was the gearbox that went.
The gearbox.
Was that a 1.4, did you say?
Oh, yeah.
I think they used the gearbox, and this is my Volkswagen nerdery coming through now, that had the weak rivets on the differential, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's kind of what went wrong. I had a friend, his name was Callum, and I worked at Halfords with him. He had a 1.4 litre Mark IV Golf, and he went through about 3 or 4 engines on it just by driving like a hooligan. So I'm not surprised that your one eventually broke.
The funny thing was with mine is I wasn't driving like a hooligan at the time. I was actually doing a consistent 70 on the motorway, and then suddenly all I hear is bang, clink, 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 clink. Look in my rearview mirror, plume of smoke. Trying to accelerate, it's just revving and nothing's happening. Pulled over, opened the engine bay, and there was a hole about that big in my gearbox casing. So,
Oh dear.
not really sure what happened there, but that's what happens when you buy cheap.
And to be fair, I mean, you managed to strip that for parts and pretty much make your money back.
I made a profit, yeah.
Made a profit.
I mean, that is one of the good things about cars of that value, especially when you're talking like, 3-figure cars. Like, generally speaking, a total loss is pretty difficult to achieve just because there will be enough bits on there that you can, break it, flog it. Like, someone's going to make something out of it, or potentially somebody will be convinced that maybe it's not the lost cause that you know that it is, and they can buy it and sort it out for cheap. Isn't that right, Will?
I mean, my Mark IV Golf, I don't know if you clocked my silver Mark IV Golf estate that I have outside. I bought that £350 and I'm about £5,000 into it.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's not the word my wife would use, but I still think it's worth it.
Yeah. I think if it's the right
myself.
car and you've got a passion for it, it's always worth it.
It is. I've always loved the Mark IV Golf platform. And
As I can tell by the headlight next to me.
yeah, absolutely. That's just because my other one's broken. That means to go in at some point. But I always loved them, and the fact that it was an estate as a musician as well. And it's got the most important thing to me, a flat load lip.
Yes.
When you get stuff in the back of it, and it's brilliant. So that was worth the near £5,000 in itself.
Nice.
Yeah. But of course, you'd been driving for quite some time, hadn't you? Now, we may do another future episode just talking about this sort of thing, but do you want to give us a little summary between the two of you about what it was that you were getting up to before you started driving on the road?
When I was 14, I started racing in full-on race prepped go-karts with the idea of, it was a full-on race package to try and get up into car racing. After 2 years of my dad and I working really, really hard, we managed to get spotted by a car racing team, Team Hard, who was a touring car team, and ended up doing the Volkswagen Racing Cup, which was why I wanted a Volkswagen Golf as my first car. And did the Volkswagen Racing Cup for 2 years, drove pretty much every track in the UK, all the big ones at least, raced at Spa-Francorchamps as well in Belgium, which was amazing. My first time driving on the street was actually as a 16-year-old in Belgium, where we did a police-led parade into the town of Stavelot. And that was my first time driving a car. So yeah, a bit of driving experience before I was on the road.
That's pretty special.
The annoying thing is that normally that privilege is reserved for the parent who supports their kid. Normally, it's meant to be the parent who traditionally drives the race car down to the Stavelot Square. But he was like, "Dad, this is my first chance to drive a real car on the road. I'm 16." I was like, "Okay, I can't take this away from you. Go on, you have it." So I ended up driving. I drove it
Yeah,
back.
we compromised, and I drove there, and you drove back. Yeah.
That's very, very cool. I remember when I had my motorbike license, but I hadn't had it that long. And to do me an introduction into the world of like big proper bikes, Dad took me on the Ron Haslam Race School, which was run at Donington Park. And the sort of entry level for that was done on CB 500s, which are pretty ordinary, standard-looking motorbikes. No fairing or bodywork or anything like that on them. 50 horsepower, something like that. So, which in a bike is plenty. And if you're used to like a scooter with like 20 horsepower, like it's a lot. And some of it's done on the track, but they also did a bit in the car park where they teach you like the basics of here's a corner, here's like 3 different ways of taking the corner. Because much like with a car, you're like, well, if you're in a nice little lightweight mid-engine car, you'll take the corner this way. If you're in a Hellcat, you'll take the corner this way, and they do all that sort of stuff. And then a part of it was doing a basic slalom. And Ron Haslam is a former MotoGP rider. His son, Liam Haslam, was there. Back in the day, my dad actually used to sponsor Liam Haslam when he raced mopeds. So they've always known each other quite well. I was in the car park. There's like 4 lines of people just going through these cones. And I'm in the line with Ron Haslam teaching. So it's already kind of surreal being on a bike day with 2 like pretty high-end, bike riders. And so I go through the cones and Ron looks at me and goes, "Okay, cool, that's easy. All right, now do it basically kneeling on the seat." Never knelt on a seat of a motorbike in my life, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let's quickly work out how to kneel on the seat and not fall off before I get back to the start. Okay, did that. And he goes, "Okay, cool, yeah, that's easy. All right, now do it one-handed." Okay, all right, so I go back and then I'm just doing it just off the clutch, just doing control one-handed. And he was like, "Now do it one-handed, the other hand. So no clutch, just accelerator. So you're going to go quicker." So I'm doing it. Then I looked over and everybody else is just doing it normally. And I'm there, kneeling on the seat, arm in the air, going along. And everyone else is probably thinking like, he's trying to show off to an ex-MotoGP rider. Like, I don't know how that's going to work out. And I felt like such a tool.
They were just winding you up, basically.
Oh, it was brilliant. I loved it. But, hey-ho, these memories we have. And they're important. And I think something we've talked about in previous podcasts is that for a lot of us, like it's those really early formative memories that stay with you, like your whole life. And when it comes, cars are such an emotional thing. On the last podcast, we had my buddy Ben over. For a bit of research, we've been watching old Top Gear. And I think Top Gear is going to get a whole episode. Like I've already made an executive decision on that one, right? There's so many things. I mean, what stuff did you watch growing up? Because you've also grown up in the era where YouTube started to become a thing, but obviously it wasn't when you were really young.
No, when I was really young, always Top Gear was the highlight of my week. I'd love to just get back, watch Top Gear, watch the new episode. It was always amazing. Formula One as well. We used to watch Formula One. And then, I think as I started to get into like my early teens, I'd say is when YouTube was really starting to become a bigger thing. And you've got a lot of the people, some of them still relevant to this day. Like TJ Hunt was really early on the YouTube game. And there were quite a few other, mainly a lot of American car YouTubers, but then also from the British scene, Supercars of London. Obviously, one of the first people to really get big on doing that sort of thing. It was really cool the way he transitioned from the car spotter to doing the content.
Yeah.
More of the content that we see of YouTube today. So yeah, that kind of YouTube was what I really first started to watch.
Did you ever watch the Adam LZ era of YouTube as well? That Haggard garages as well, things like that.
Yes, yeah.
What a time to be alive!
It was a great time.
For those who know, you'll know.
Yeah, it was a much simpler time on YouTube as well. You could really do anything so raw. It was just picking up a camera and going about the things that they did, and it would do well. People would watch. Yeah. Whereas today, because everyone and their mother's a YouTuber, to be able to stand out, the quality, or there has to be something special about the content you're making. Whereas back then, and I quite enjoyed that. I liked the real, raw side of it. I thought it was really good.
That's actually making a resurgence at the moment. There's a growing number of popular YouTube channels that are really just very raw, filmed with their phone, just people just talking to their camera about what's going on in their day, and some of them are blowing up in like a pretty crazy way.
Laziness.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, obviously, because you're a former filmmaker still, but coming from a formally trained background and everything, yeah, that sounds lazy. But I mean, for a lot of these folks, that like YouTube is just a normal thing, and that's what they saw as YouTube when they were growing up. Just somebody just rambling about their day, or vlogging is what it was back then. Mm-hmm. Not like how we do vlogging now, but yeah, but it's making a comeback. There's some channels that are blowing up just with that type of content.
I mean, I do remember. It was actually when I started my YouTube journey, one of the important things, the biggest question I really had was, it was already a fairly saturated marketplace then. And it was a case of, well, is it still possible to go into this world and succeed, or is it full now? Like, in terms of, hobbies and things, cars are pretty niche. Like, they are really small. Like, there's probably more people interested in breakfast cereals. I remember when we worked in film school, the media industry, like not just filmmaking, the media industry is 1/10 the size of the breakfast industry. Like, it's insane. I mean, I often say to people, like, if I really wanted to make money on YouTube, I'm going to start doing makeup tutorials. That kind of stuff. The money they throw around. Like, people think like that car launches and stuff are extravagant. No. Compared to like cosmetics and stuff like that, the money involved is just monstrous.
I have a point about this. Back in the day, like probably 5-6 years ago, maybe a bit more than that, I remember there was Jeffree Star was quite big with his cosmetics.
Oh yeah, crikey, that was controversial.
Yeah, it was controversial, but the amount of like money that went into that, I saw some of the behind the scenes stuff, because my wife is quite into makeup, and I just couldn't believe the amount of money that was getting thrown around and things. It just seemed unfathomable.
You should see the rates they get on the ads.
Yeah.
It's like double what a car YouTuber would get, sometimes triple.
So basically what we're saying here is that we're going to do James up with some makeup soon and see how that one goes.
JM1 Cosmetics has a nice ring to
it. But you know what? Something I want to mention briefly is, some people might be hearing about, his racing and everything. We weren't like wealthy or anything. I couldn't afford the cars that I've got now at that time.
You had the 370, Zed.
I had the 370, already.
Your first 370.
Yeah, and that was like a big deal for me to be able to buy that car. But what we did is we used social media, including YouTube, to attract sponsors. And one of the main reasons we got asked to step up into car racing was the fact that, Tony Gillam of Team Hardy was really, really supportive at the time, and continued to be thereafter. He said, look, what you're doing in karting is being wasted. Like, what you could achieve with what you guys are doing in cars is phenomenal. And he was right. I mean, by the end of the first season in cars, we'd signed a deal that in total was worth about 100K for the following season. And that's not 100K in our pockets. That's to pay for the racing.
Zero profit, all back into the racing.
So how old were you when this kicked off?
14 was when I did karts properly. I did like a arrive and drive season beforehand when I was 13, but that was it's a quite cheap, affordable thing you just do once a month. for I think it was like 6-7 months. And it was just a bunch of kids getting in normal corporate karts at Rye House. And that was great. And then 14 went into the proper Rotax karts. Awesome little 2-stroke 125cc go-karts, which had these mega sticky tires. They go up over 60 miles an hour. Crazy little things. And then when I was 16 was the first year I was able to race in cars, because that's when you can get your adult license.
He actually competed in the Ginetta Junior Scholarship when he was 15, and we got to the finals and didn't win, because usually the person that wins can afford to do more Ginetta seasons thereafter, and we certainly weren't financed for that at that point.
Talking about the YouTube side of it then, I remember when we got around 30,000 views on one of the videos, and back in 2014, this was like, wow, this is a huge number.
25,000 it was, I remember.
I remember we were like, wow, this is viral. So when you look at that compared to today, it's
Yeah,
quite
but
funny.
it's all about what you're used to, isn't it? Like, one day 30,000 is incredible. The next day you might be like, 30,000 is okay. And then the day after that you might be like, oh God, 30,000. Like, oh no, that died a death, that video.
Just relative, I think, just to what YouTubers were generally getting back in that, around that era. That was quite a big number. It was quite rare to see many numbers bigger than that.
So I remember in another life on another channel about a decade ago, I think I got nearly 100,000 views on one video, and in quite a succession in time, and I was like, it can't get any better than this. Oh my God. So yeah, I know what that's like.
Yeah.
I get that.
Do you know what? Before we get into enthusiast cars, I wonder, what was it that got you into cars? Do you even remember?
We've had this conversation before. I think it's quite hard for me to pinpoint one particular thing. There was always lots of different influences, but I've just always, ever since I can remember, I've been into cars. I've been into toy cars, remote control cars. There's just been, but I think the thing that really compounded it was when I was younger, I used to love playing video games, and you used to play video games as well, but my parents were both very strict on, you can't play 15 rated games or 18 rated games. So all my friends were playing Call of Duty, but I wasn't allowed to.
By the way, they were all playing Call of Duty at the age of about 7.
Yeah.
I was
And
like, no way.
the games that I really ended up drawing to, which were always 3+ or PG, whatever the rating was, were racing games. So Project Gotham Racing was one that I really grew up on. Test Drive Unlimited, the old Need for Speed, Midnight Club. Those were like my bread and butter, and I would play them and repeat the stories and just sit there and do races until I had enough money to get like every car in the game. And it was that was my real, I think, compounding moment of this is my passion, and I just never veered from it. It's quite sad today, actually. All I do is cars. My job is around cars. All my friends like cars. I do cars for fun. It's all cars, but I still haven't got tired of it yet.
I don't think there's anything sad about that. You basically followed your dreams. And one of the things that I love is that, like, yeah, okay, I've now, taken a slightly convoluted path, but got myself into a career where I basically just talk about cars. But it turns out there are an awful lot of other passionate people out there, who love their cars. But I've gotten to meet so many amazing, interesting people through cars. I mean, the strangest thing, I might talk about it again in future, if my friends aren't bored of hearing about it already. I had a director of one of my favorite films, who shall remain nameless, email me about cars, and I had to respond with like, oh yeah, thank you, here's the answer to your question. Like, are you this chap? And it's like, I think had I continued in my film career, chance to talk to him, never gonna happen. Not ever. But in the world of cars, you find these random connections with people, and suddenly doors start opening that you thought were previously just going to stay shut forever. And it's really nice. Like, cars are the kind of social lubricant almost that bring people together. And then you find you have other common interests as well. And I also find like I actually quite like it when people ask me like, why do you like cars so much? Because when you're forced to think about it, you suddenly realize that there are a whole bunch of different reasons why you like cars. You know, it's the excitement, the drama, the noise, the look, the artistry. You know, like I often say to people, like, you know, don't belittle anyone for loving cars, because that child that's obsessed with Project Gotham or Gran Turismo or whatever, they could grow up to become an ambulance driver. You know, they could get you to hospital when you blooming well need it. Or they could grow up to become an award-winning architect, and you find out that actually it's the lines of their favourite cars inspired them to create things of real, genuine beauty. You know, engineering is, you know, good engineering is good engineering no matter where it's applied. And cars are quite interesting because obviously you've got a lot of dynamic engineering and stuff going on. And I know that your job now concerns dynamic engineering, safety, all that sort of really important stuff. And regardless of the place that cars have in people's lives, like they're still probably taking transport. Like, even if you don't own a car, you get on a bus or you get in a train, and the person that's designed the wheels, the controls, the seats, you know, everything about that, like it all applies. Like, it maybe you know, you're going to look at like a train in a very different way as you do, say, you know, like a Ferrari or something. But Ant and I got the chance to talk to Andy Palmer previously, who was formerly CEO of Aston Martin and very high up in Nissan. And he was telling us that actually sometimes it's like the commercial projects that they find interesting. You know, we've got to build a van, and this one van has to meet the requirements of both the Japanese market and the European market. And they both have completely different ways that they measure whether something qualifies, you know, as a van. And so you have to come up with really innovative solutions for this problem. And I think it's a fascinating industry to get into.
I can just say though, Damani, I think it might be genetic, because from the age of about 3, he's obsessed with little like Hot Wheels, Matchbox toy cars. He had the most, I think a bigger collection of toy cars by the time he was 5 than I had throughout my whole of my childhood. And also he could have, you know, if we didn't had the option of YouTube back in the day, I probably could have just stuck a camera in the car, because we'd be driving along to get anywhere. And he'd be like, oh, Dad, did you know that the new Ferrari, blah, 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 whatever that is, they've actually got, and he started telling me all the details about the car. It's 0 to 60 times, how much it weighs, its power to weight ratio, some new feature about some car, and I'd be like, he'd be talking, and it'd be almost a little bit like me and you two, like, there's 2 of you that I'm trying to interrupt, which is a challenge. This was harder. This was harder. He would just be reading it off, and I'd be like,
me and my best friend to this day, when we were 11, sometimes on our breaks in between lessons at school, instead of a lot of the time we'd go out and play football and stuff, but a lot of the time, multiple times a week, we would go into the computer room and refresh Autocar News and just read out all the latest things that are happening in the car industry. We used to refresh Speed Hunters as well, because that was really big back then. He's actually a writer for Speed Hunters now as well.
Yeah, there you go.
And their top contributor. And yeah, that was what we found fun. So when I only really had him at school to talk to about it. And then none of my friends at school were really into cars. So then when I would come home, and my mum wasn't into cars either. So when I was seeing my dad, I was like unloading all of this information, and my brain just couldn't stop unloading it. And he was like, sometimes he'd be like, Damani, do you mind if we just not talk about cars for like 15 minutes? And I was like, yeah, but there's this one more thing, the brand new.
and I would say to him, I said, you do know that a conversation involves 2 people, not just you talking and me listening. I might have some questions about the car you just spoke about, but you're on to the next one straight away.
So he was like a walking automotive top trumps.
Yeah, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
The funny thing is that when Ant and I first started talking during lockdown and COVID, and I obviously saw that you guys had a YouTube channel and you're both in it. I assumed that it was Damani's channel. They kind of strong-armed his dad to be in, because typically speaking, that's the way that it works. Like the young person is kind of into YouTube and everything, but dad's probably got like a bit more money, so he's able to go places and do things. So dad kind of gets unwittingly dragged along, but it actually then turned out that it was more, not the opposite, but obviously that you were kind of trying to do this and then keep Damani involved, and this, I understand, was kind of a natural continuation of what you'd started when he was karting.
What happened was so basically the whole racing thing became unsustainable. Like after about 4 years, we were both pretty much burnt out. And
You with a full-time job, me at school doing my GCSEs.
yeah, and then there was I had to manage him and do a bunch of other things. And he was having to go to training and do track prep and all that stuff. And I think the conclusion was that if I was wealthy to the point where I could just write the checks for the racing so that he just had to go to school and race, we'd have been fine. But because we had to raise the money to pay for the racing through sponsorship, that was like having another full-time job on top of 2 other full-time jobs is what it felt like. So his school would fall behind or his racing would fall behind, so he just decided to stop. And a year went by and I just started having this itch and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it's because I was always helping him make the content. I would often do a lot of the editing because I wanted to make sure that he did his homework and kept up at school. So I'd stay up late doing the editing or wake up very early in the morning, like 5 a.m. or whatever, to do stuff like that. And I realized I missed it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to pick up a camera and I'm just going to film something. And when I say a camera, it was actually a mobile phone. And I just filmed something and then haven't looked back.
But that's really good, because I do speak to a lot of people that talk about doing YouTube. And I would say, of all the people that come to me asking for advice on, YouTube channel, this, that, and the other, 90% of them never actually make a video. I think it was Orson Welles who once said the best education in a film is to make one. And it's very, very true. I mean, when I went to film school, in the first month or two of being there, they got you to make your own short film. And it seemed a little bit odd. I was like, hang on a minute, we haven't really been taught anything and they're chucking us in. And the point of it was to remind you how crap you were. So that you could see all the things you didn't know. Because basically they're like, right, well, let's see how good you actually are. Go make a film, come back, we'll look at it. And then we'll step by step go through everything that you've done wrong so you can understand why you've done it wrong, why the right way is the right way, and so on and so forth. There's actually quite a clever way to do it, to be honest. So I'll have to give them credit.
There's also only so much you can learn theoretically. So much of it has to just be doing it. Even little things like holding the camera in a certain way and lots of little things that you learn. I remember you telling us a lot about certain things like just letting shots extend further past rather than just cutting the camera straight away. It gives you more room in the edit. And then you learn so much from the editing process on how to film better. I actually think that you learn more about filming from editing than you do from filming.
I totally agree with you on that. When I make content as well, it's the amount of times, especially in the beginning days of it, I'd go, I needed to leave a longer pause there. When I get in front of the camera, I need to leave a few seconds intro rather than talking so I can put my fades and put my transitions and things like that. And yes, it's like a lot of things in life. Sometimes you can get so much kind of theory and just reading up theoretical knowledge, but it doesn't really mean anything until you actually try to do it.
I feel like we've got probably a whole other episode. Actually, we have talked about doing like a Life in Cars episode on JM on cars potentially at some point. But what we were going to talk about today, and this is my job to bring everything back on track.
Absolutely.
You're very good at it too.
Was even when it's him, is that we were going to talk about the accessibility of enthusiast cars, because this is a topic that has been close to your heart for several years now. Obviously, now you're in your full-time job working with a OEM engineering cars, but for a good few years before that, you were a student.
Yeah. And what's terrifying is that remind me, how old now?
26.
Okay, so for the sake of argument, you're 10 years younger than myself and Will. So you would think that wouldn't make too much of a difference, but actually it's an enormous difference, because not even just when we were younger, but actually I think when we were kind of your age as well, so about 10 years ago, I remember in the early days of the channel, particularly with myself and Laurie from Laurie's Mechanical Marvels, we were forever on eBay. Like we picked up an MGZS 180 for 525 quid. Granted, we got 525 quid's worth of car. His MR2 was 600 quid, right? A running, working MR2 that did turn out to have a few issues. And if it wasn't an MR2, probably wouldn't have been, lasted as long as it did. But that, yeah, again, 600 quid or give or take. I think we got some money off because the dipstick had been cut in half.
As you do.
Yeah, true story. And, I remember getting decent, nice old BMWs for barely any money. Doing the research for the last episode with Ben, we started watching old Top Gears, and that's painful, not just because like a Miura was like 80 grand or something like that, or 100 grand or whatever, but because you get like the 1,500 quid cars. One of them's a 635 CSI.
Yeah.
Old V12 Jaguar. Look, the 1,500 pound Porsches. Like, there are bits for a 928 I can't get for 1,500 quid anymore.
You just couldn't do those Top Gear challenges these days at all. I mean, look at their first challenge. I think it had something like a Rover 416 GTI, some other cars of similar kind of price and things like that. Yeah, they were cheap everyday cars, but you couldn't buy one of those for £150 anymore. Long gone are the days of going up to a main dealer and asking, what's your trade-in bin? Have you got anything around the back that's going to go to scrap or something like that? Yeah, I've got this car at 150, 200 quid. I mean, the last time I had to do that kind of thing was in 2018. I had £500 budget, and I did end up getting a car, but there just was barely any around that price point then. I mean, I remember I went to see a 200,000 mile Fiesta diesel, 2005, I think it was. And I was like, can you give me a little bit of money off? Because the front tyres are bald. I just need to do something. No, it's 500 quid. That's it. And I'm like, even then, that's not worth it. Just a few years ago, that would have been half that price.
Yeah. Today, I think your absolute bottom line for a running, driving car with some amount of MOT left is about £1,000.
I'd say a bit more personally.
Yeah, I think at £1,000 you might get lucky. Like realistically, like again, if you're not mechanically minded, you probably are talking at least 1,500.
Just go look on Auto Trader and look at the cars underneath £500. Or there's either none there or they're all massively broken and scrapped.
They're all spares, repairs, MOT failure, like with horrific list of advisories, all that sort of stuff. And I think, you know what? I think there are two key things that did in that market. Number one, scrappage scheme. Because there are a whole bunch of, at the time, maybe a little bit ordinary kind of cars, stuff like your Maestro. Maestros and those ilk, like cars that had survived, were 20 years old, 20, 30 years old at the point. Okay, they weren't in great condition, but all of a sudden, your car that previously was worth about 100 quid was then suddenly £2,000 to the right car dealer. They just vanished, and it was tragic because, all right, there were a lot of cars that maybe were best scraps that went, but there were also a load of cars that could have provided decent, clean, affordable transport to people that went. And the tragedy, of course, is that most people chopped it in for a diesel, the exact diesels that now nobody can give away because we realise actually they are probably just as bad as the cars that got Part X'd, if not worse, because obviously a new car was being made. And the other thing, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, eBay, right? Because before eBay, if you wanted to sell a car, basically it was the free ads or Auto Trader, the magazine. And that was expensive. And you had to rely upon somebody buying the magazine who's actively looking for a car. Or maybe like a local specialist magazine, or like, your, Land Rover Enthusiast quarterly, whatever, you got to pick it up and hope maybe it hasn't sold already. Minute eBay comes along, all of a sudden, potentially the world is your market. My dad was big into old motorbikes. And over the space of probably only about 2 or 3 years, it went from, yeah, of course you can get pieces for those. It's really easy to get stuff, to you couldn't get it anymore because blokes that have been sitting on a hoard of valuable spare parts from the 60s, 70s and 80s that you only knew about him if you knew a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, Well, now the guy could sling it all on eBay and just flog it.
Yeah, basically the supply was as it was, but the demand suddenly dramatically increased.
I just want to say one thing. You're forgetting about one of the biggest ways people sold cars back in the day. On the roadside with a note in the windscreen.
Yep.
Yep.
Still see that though.
Yeah.
Not as often, though. There is somebody selling a Mazda MX-5 I saw out with the note in the windscreen. I thought, oh, how retro.
I saw my
pretty
favourite
old
one the
school.
other day. It was at the Southside Hustle. It was a BAC mono,
Nice.
and it had a cardboard thing set on it saying "for sale." Only ever used for the school run and the Sunday shop.
Brilliant. I love that.
Lots of visibility is what it said as well.
Yeah.
Great visibility. Anyway, what's your dream car, Damani?
Wow.
Let's think big, and then reality can bite, and we'll work our way back.
Okay.
Did you say dream car?
Yeah.
Singular.
Yeah, because we ain't got the time.
Okay.
There's too many to list, but I can kind of I'll start from the top and work slowly, work not too slowly down. I think a dream car of mine, if I had a stupid amount of money, would be to go to Pagani and tell them to make me a Zonda DM. Or
Yep,
whatever
okay.
it is. That would be my number one. I love Lamborghinis, so Aventador SVs, much further styling on them to the SVJ. Absolutely love that. Slightly more attainable, hopefully, one day, but they keep going up in price, is a first generation Gallardo Superleggera with the 5 litre.
Yeah.
Beautiful sound. I would absolutely love one of those. I know you had a bit of a hard time with your 5 litre Gallardo, so we'll see what happens when it comes to that time. I love my Japanese cars as well, so I would love an S15 and to do a silly, crazy drift build with an RB engine in it, because I love the way they look, but I'm not a huge fan of the 4-cylinder SR20. I just think that car with a 6-cylinder would be brilliant. I have an RX-8, which I don't ever want to sell, so I want to keep that. I'd love to get an FD RX-7. I'd love to get an FC RX-7. I'd love a Dodge Viper, a Hellcat. We can keep going.
I saw a thing the other day where somebody has put a Viper engine into an S2000,
Yeah.
and they've
Yeah.
now put a wide body kit on it.
Yep.
And I must admit, as an S2000 owner, I looked at it and I thought, why didn't you just buy a Viper? Like, because you've put the engine from one in, now you've had to make it really big and wide. Like, just start with a Viper, make it look like an S2000. It'd probably be quicker. Like, I don't get the concept. Like, because first off, you're basically breaking an S2000 by putting a boat anchor of an engine in the front of it. I don't care how light that blooming thing is, how many aluminium parts on it. It's a 10 where there should be a 4.
Yeah.
Right? The S2000's engine is quite far back and it's quite compact. Like, the Viper's V10 is not compact. No. And the car's lively enough with about 250 horsepower, like with double the power, more importantly, all that torque. I mean, the Viper's a snippy little devil, and that's obviously built to have that engine in it. Do love Vipers.
I love them so much. I used to work at a track experience company, and we used to take people out for hot laps in the cars that they had. And my favorite one was whenever anyone requested the Viper to go out, because it was just an absolute animal. It's just like, I don't think I've ever driven a car that's so good, but also so stupid, because it does everything great. It handles really well. It pulls really well in a straight line. But the second it starts to go out, it goes. But then it holds it really nicely as well. It was just an amazing thing. And it's so long, and you're like sitting on the back wheels. Like, I've driven Caterhams before and other cars that have like a long, you sit like really far back. But with the Viper, it just felt like this, you had an entire car in front of you.
You feel like a comic book villain driving
Yeah.
a Viper, don't you? Like, there is just something. I mean, like a 96 GTS in the blue with the white stripe. I mean, look, I've driven them and I've been up close to them, and the build quality is hilariously bad.
Yeah.
There are panel gaps you could lose a child in. Like, the thing is awfully put together. Like, the gear lever looks like it's broken, but I don't care. It just wears its heart on its sleeve. It's just a great car, but it's what, 50 grand or so?
Yeah, Vipers are one of those cars that are really going up now because obviously they kept making them, and I think this is actually a big thing with why cars, it's really hard to get into the fun ones because people kept making the cars and everyone wanted the new one, whereas now people aren't making the cars that true enthusiasts like to drive as much anymore. Everyone now wants the older stuff, so they're really going up in value. Like I was looking at, my favorite generation is the final generation Viper.
Yeah.
And I was looking at those, and you can't find one for under 6 figures anymore
Wow.
Do you know, I was
in the UK.
the first generation Viper is always been, because when we talk about the video games, the original Need for Speed, that had the Viper in it, and that is a car I'd love to own as well, a dream car actually.
The old RT10.
Yeah, the one that had the 3-spoke wheels and everything, and like the ridiculous roof that you couldn't like really easily put up and down. I don't even think it had like door
I think
handles.
it was an afterthought, the roof. I think
Yeah.
they didn't intend it to have a roof, and then they realized actually people probably want one of those. Yeah, the original Viper is like, it's not to my taste, but like I respect it immensely. Okay, so what sort of things are your friends driving about and that are into cars?
Quite a range, to be fair. On the cheaper, more entry-level enthusiast cars, I've got friends with MX-5s. They absolutely die for them. I think that is still one of the cars, not as cheap as they once were, but still a cheap car to get into, relatively cheap to maintain, unless it's rusty, which a lot of them are now. But
NA's MBs there.
yeah. And they're just a great car. Great, fun car. Civics as well, which I think is slightly more niche. You kind of have to be into Civics, I think, to really want one. But they're fun. A lot of my friends are into BMWs. So E36, E46, E92, M3s, which I think are a great deal right now. Really, really good car. A lot of car for the money. One of my best friends has got F80 M3, which he absolutely loves, but then you're looking at the 20 grand mark. One of my best friends has got a E38 7 Series, absolutely stunning thing. It's a Japanese import car as well, BMW individual spec. That was his second ever car, and he got a really good deal on it because he managed to swap in his A1 and only a little bit of cash on top, I think.
I saw that car on Instagram because and you put a story up with that the other day. Where were you with that?
Oh, that was at the Southside Hustle down in Wimbledon. Yeah.
And I just saw that you did a panning shot on Instagram of that, and I just saw that. And I was like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That is just looks awesome, that car.
I nearly bought it. He was thinking about selling it, and I was like, no, that's a terrible idea. You shouldn't sell it. I think it was just like a bit of frustration with ULEZ and stuff like that, and a few other things.
He was considering changing to an SL55 AMG.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so I thought, do you know what? I love that car. So maybe I'll buy it. And then when he realizes what a terrible mistake he's made, he can just come to me and say, can I buy it back? And I would have sold it back to him for whatever it cost.
I'm really happy you never told him that because he would have taken you. He would have taken you up on the offer.
I was just waiting to hear what. Well, no, because he actually said he found a buyer. What he said that buyer was going to pay was more than I'd be comfortable paying. But you know, if he'd have come back from that and said, no, I still want to sell it, then I would have spoken to him about what I thought would have been a reasonable price. But he'd already decided after that person didn't follow through that he wasn't going to sell it. So
The owner of that car is the same one that me and him used to go into the computer room back during school and just look up all the latest stuff on cars.
It was a good time, wasn't it?
Great time. Yeah.
So I want to now start talking about some cars that can still be had for reasonable money. And I think to do this, I think there are a few, what my grandmother might have called home truths, I think that have to be stated. Because if you're looking to try and acquire something on a reasonable budget, and I'm going to say about 10 grand, give or take, with a bit of wiggle room, because this is all fantastical stuff at the minute, okay? But 10 grand, I think, is an attainable amount for a lot of people, okay? Not everybody, but for a lot of people. And in the world of exciting cars, that's pretty much entry-level money, okay? I think the first thing people need to remember is that time has passed. 2000 was 25 years ago. So for when we were young, that's the equivalent of basically the mid-70s. Now, the upside is that a lot of cars from the 2000s have lasted far better than those from the 70s, chiefly because cars from the 70s, you just didn't expect to survive. They had 5-digit odometers for a reason, right? Because you got to 99,999, that was it. It was going one place, and that was the scrapyard, right? Of course, cars have become investments too. So where 25 years ago, you could pick up a Ferrari Dino for 30 grand, a Testarossa for like 35, a Countach for like 50. It's just not happening, okay? And it's never going to be the same again. I really don't think it is. Because although the market has softened in some places and whatnot, you're never going to see a 40 grand Testarossa ever again. Or if you do, don't buy it. Leave it to Ratarossa. He can have it, trust me. And then when he does a video on it, you'll realize why it was 40 grand, okay? But you also have, I think, if you want to get something interesting, I think you have to be willing to broaden your mind, because people often fixate on something, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But sometimes you have to accept that what you really want may either be out of reach or simply a terrible idea. You know, and I think you have to just apply the same logic that we did when we were young people and say, okay, yeah, there's this thing that we want, but you can't have it. So instead, you start going for, okay, what's my budget? What can I afford, and what can I get for that kind of money? And I do genuinely believe there are still lots of cracking bargains out there. You've just got to be willing to open your mind. And they do include stuff like MX-5s. Yeah, sure. Okay, they may be a bit more money than they were. But I also think with MX-5s, some of them are better buys now than they were 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, they were getting to the stage where they really badly needed corrosion repair. And now they've either had it done or it's blindingly obvious that they're screwed, right? Toyota MR2, across all 3 generations. Again, still reasonably accessible, particularly the 2nd gen, which is generally the one that people think of. But the 3rd gen, that is a criminally underrated car, right? It's only 140 horsepower, and most people moan about it for that. But I've driven one. They're an amazing drive, and they are going to be a lot easier to work on than a Boxster or whatever and keep running. And yeah, okay, the engines do have problems. Guess what? A new engine is nothing. Like, you can replace the whole engine, and it's not going to cost you all that much, and it's fairly easy. They've got a couple of, like, you know, known gotchas, and you can deal with it. Hatchbacks, you mentioned Clios. Sorry, you didn't mention Clios. I'm mentioning Clios, right? You mentioned Civics. And yeah, Civic, okay, if you want a really clean, tidy EP3 or like an EK9, that ship has kind of sailed. All right, you just carry on. FN2s, they're really affordable still. You know, a couple of grand for a really ropey high mileage one, but 3 to 5 gets you into a decent car. And yeah, we all know they only have 1 horsepower more than the outgoing one. The rear suspension wasn't as advanced, and Clarkson hated it. Right, cool. Clarkson doesn't have to buy it for you, right? But they're actually awesome cars, super practical. And for a lot of people working on a tighter budget, you're probably looking at one car that can do everything. And the Civic is a great example. And I hand it over to the floor because I'm talking too much.
No, the Civic is a great example because my friend who has one, his dream was always an EK9 Type R, as you mentioned, but they are crazy money now. So he had to broaden his horizon, and he decided to go with an EJ9, which is just the bog standard normal version. And he actually picked that car up for 900 and something pounds, and it had some like HSD coilovers, and the interior had been stripped, and it was like one of those typical track prepped Civics. But because he got it for such a good deal, and it only had the D14 1.4 litre, the whole point of it was, instead of spending 10 grand on an EK9, I can spend 1 grand on this car and then use that extra money to build the Civic that I want to build. Yeah. So we put in a 1.8 litre B18 engine from an MB6 Civic. So now it's got more power and more torque. Did a bunch of work to the interior and exterior and the suspension. So now he's kind of, over time, it's still far from finished, believe me.
Is a project ever finished?
But it's now gotten to this point where he's built this car that he genuinely believes that is like it would enjoy more for what he wants than a bone stock EK9 Type R, because that's the route he wanted to go down. But that's only because he broadened his horizons and went a few steps down.
Now, I remember the FN2, that was the spaceship looking one, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm, that's the one.
And you were saying that Clarkson ruined the reputation of that, didn't he? Because he slated it a lot.
Yeah, like that and a great many other cars. And it fascinates me that even to this day, there will be flippant remarks that he made 20 years ago that have just forever tarnished a car in people's minds. And it's so frustrating because sometimes, look, I'll agree with him and all that. And sometimes he's being a little bit overly dramatic, and sometimes I'm just honestly a little bit confused as to why he said what he did. But we're all entitled to our own opinions, and there's a lot of stuff out there. Civic Type R FN2, great example, that people wouldn't love. But there are also cars out there that actually he probably did champion a bit more, that are still reasonably attainable, just because everybody else trashed them, which includes a whole heap of really interesting Alfa Romeos. So I think, again, looking at the budget that we're looking at, if you want to get something properly cool, there's a chap called Brian has emailed me, and he's of middle age by his own admission, and he wants to buy his first kind of exciting car, but he can't be too frivolous. He's got a budget of about 10 grand. He has previously driven, I think not owned, a 997.1 Carrera, which is an unfortunately high watermark because it's a really brilliant car, certainly to drive. And he now wants something that's going to be exciting, can cope with a small family, but also isn't going to break the bank. Now, I suggested to him Subaru Impreza, but I think realistically what I'd say is, look, don't spend your whole 10 grand on the car. Spend like 7 or 8 and set some money aside, because they're cool, interesting cars. Yeah, sure, they have a bit of a reputation, but I think actually there are a lot of ways to own a Subaru without attracting too much attention from the local constabulary. I also suggested a number of performance Jaguars. XFR was the one I actually cited because, again, you can get those for good money. As Jaguar products go, they're pretty dependable. And he came back and said, well, no, because, reliability and everything, and the cars are thirsty. And what I realized and said to him, I said, look, I'm really sorry, but this is one of the home truths I was talking about. With those kind of requirements, you're going to have to accept compromise in your life. It is a case of, where are you willing to have the compromise? And if you are willing to compromise a little bit on certain things, there's a whole glut of great Alfa Romeos that you can have for sub 10 grand. Now, 147 and 156 GTA are beyond, but you can get the cooking versions of both of those. You could get the 156 with the Busso, that's just not a GTA, for a few £1,000s. I had a 147 with the diesel engine, the Q2 Sport, which actually came with the factory fitted diff. That's the Q2 bit. Great car, great daily, really interesting. If you're feeling fruity, you could have a Brera. You could have a 159, again, interesting car, kind of nice to drive, not perfect, in fact, very imperfect, but got a bit of soul about it, nice interior. The Alfa GT, completely forgotten car, bit random. It's a coupe based on the estate platform. Don't ask me why. And they had a whole bunch of Busso engines left over. So it's basically got the power of like a 156 GTA, but it didn't get a GTA badge. And it's an odd looking thing, but quite practical. So maybe I'll suggest that. Of course, yeah, it's a 20-year-old Alfa, so guess what? It might give you some issues. But I think anything that gets to 20-odd years old that's even remotely appealing to petrol heads, I think you just have to admit that at some point, your mechanic is gonna pull back the gums and go, that's the one. You gotta sit down for that, haven't you?
But I mean, the thing is, like, going back to the point that Damani was just making, his friend basically bought a cheap car but had the extra budget to then make it into what he wanted it to be. And I suppose that would be really the way to do it. And there's some cars that you'd actually intentionally buy one with a broken engine, and then use the extra money to build that engine so that it's fresh and
RX-8,
like an RX-8, for example. There's a whole story about that, which we haven't talked about on our channel, but it's lined up to come out very, very soon. So
the only thing is, with what Damani's friend has done here, is that I've known a whole bunch of people do this, where they've sort of said, I really want like a Type R, but I can't afford it. So I'm basically going to buy a Bogo one and stick a Type R engine in it. And the two issues are, first off, there's a lot more to making a Type R than just that. Secondly, your insurance company might have something to say about these sorts of shenanigans. When you're like 40, they don't care. right? But if you are a young person, and we're talking very much about young people in today's video, yeah, engine swaps and stuff, like, I can't imagine even Admiral going for that one.
To be fair, I'm pretty sure he was insured with Admiral, and it wasn't too bad because it was a standard engine, a standard Honda engine from a different Civic into his Civic. I don't know if that played a part in it at all.
Might have done.
But his insurance wasn't too bad. But speaking of insurance, I actually think that's such a huge part to play in today's car market and what young people can afford, because it's not just the value of the car you have to consider. It's obviously all the running costs around it, but insurance is such a huge one now. My Mark IV Golf 1.4 litre, my first car, I had to have a black box on it when I got it insured. This was in 2017, 2018, around that time. And because my home address was London and I bought this car for 900 and whatever pounds, my insurance was $3,000 for the first year. Luckily, I went to uni about a month after buying the car, and I'd already plugged in the numbers, and my insurance had gone down to $1,000 for where I was going to uni, because it was in Wiltshire, not in London. So it was a third of the price, which was affordable. So I only paid that $3,000 value for that 1 month of my first insurance, and then went down to the cheaper price. But it's just crazy. It's depending on where you live and what car you buy. The insurance has such a huge factor on what you can get into nowadays.
That's one of the concerns that we have with my nephew. My nephew, he's 17, turning 18 soon. He's going to be taking his driving lessons and then doing like his test and stuff, because he needs to drive for the work and the job he wants to do. And we just look at what's about now, and I think, I don't know how you're going to be able to afford to insure it at all. You know, he'd have to spend his entire budget of his job insuring a car, and he's not a car enthusiast, so I don't know for him if he would think that's worth it.
I think the other thing just to watch out for is, because to make it even vaguely affordable for your first year, is going to have a black box in the car.
Yeah.
Do your research, because some insurers are renowned for their black boxes to be absolutely ridiculously hypersensitive and completely inaccurate. There were quite a few times when with him there was like got flagged for absolutely nothing. Like,
Yeah. You say absolutely nothing.
no, there were times that, not all the time.
I had to cancel my first black box because I took what they said to literally, and the scoring thing was speed, braking, and time of day, because you got scored worse for driving at night. So I took that literally. I didn't speed at all in that car, but I also just didn't brake. So when a roundabout would come up, I'd have a bit of a play through it. And I was like, why is my braking score so low? I'm not braking. And I realized that obviously it's just reading G-forces.
It's race driver logic, isn't it? I didn't even touch the brakes. What are you on about? Like,
No, but there were what other times that I remember there was a quite, like, I think even I was with you and you got flagged for something. I was like, you didn't do that. So I did some research, and there's quite a few complaints with various insurers with their black boxes as to how inaccurate they are. And then what people have done is they've like used alternative measuring devices, including G meters and the like, to try and then prove that actually, no, this black box is completely wrong, you know, or they've had dash cam footage which they can line up with the driving at the time.
I was going to say, I think a black box should come only in partnership with a dash cam, because first of all, a dash cam is a great thing to prove that you weren't being an idiot. Also, secondly, I'm lucky enough, we grew up before black boxes were a thing on cars. We live in a rural area. There will be many, many occasions where something runs out in front of you. You won't have been able to see it because the woods go right up to the edge of the road. You would not have had a chance to know it was there. And do you know what? Maybe that sudden bit of braking is actually an excellent piece of driving in which the car was brought to a stop with plenty of time. Nothing was harmed. Nobody was injured or anything like that. You've averted an issue. But all the black box sees is, oh, you braked suddenly. You must have been doing something wrong. Well, no. Or, like you say, what happens if you get a night shift? Again, to me, this is daft. Like, what happens if you take a job that's got rubbish hours, right, to work hard? You're now penalised by your insurer because you have to work a night shift.
Like in a pub, which is where he was working at the time.
Yeah. That's wrong to me. I think that's just unfair.
Yes, indeed. So watch out for the black boxes. Do the research because there are lots of forums where different people do talk about let's say the accuracy of these different black boxes for different companies.
Well, I can already give you a bit of insight on that. I think part of the problem is the manufacture of these black boxes are using rubbish components. Where and how they're installed in the vehicle will probably make it quite a lot of difference as well. Because I've got a tracker in my Maestro. And it's one of those things where I've got an app and I can look back at it and I can see the drives and it tells me G-force, acceleration and braking and all sorts of stuff like that. And I get a lot of like red flags, red this, you do all that. And I'm like, I was literally cruising. I'm just driving. I mean, thankfully, I don't have to answer to an insurance company with that. But looking back at it, I can very easily see how some of these boxes would be telling you that you're doing naughty things and you're really not.
I've just now got in my head. I'm so sorry. I've just got in my head this idea, this period correct. Open your boot and there's like an enormous suitcase with tracker written on it, and a little spinning satellite dish, reel-to-reel data recorders, like period correct, tracker circa 1985. It's like you've just ram-raided Radio Shack.
How did you know?
One of the things that's horrible about these black boxes as well is when I had my first Mazda RX-8, I was still at uni and it was a terrible idea to have one then. And the only way I could afford to have it was to insure it with a black box, which I only needed to do for the first year or 6 months or so. But I was horrified to know that they had to hard mount it to the car, which I was like, okay, that's absolutely fine. The guy came round, opened up the car and I was like, here you go. Suddenly I hear... I was like, what's he doing? I look in, he's drilling into my interior trim to screw in the black box.
No!
Yeah. And I was there, I was horrified, I was mortified.
Fiend!
It was only in the passenger footwell, but I was just there like, well I was never told that you were going to drill in, you're damaging the car.
There's no reason, like none, for them to have to do that. That's. I mean, if they'd done that to one of my cars, I would have billed for the piece of trim that they damaged. Like that's shocking.
It was horrifying.
Yeah, so watch out for that too. But something we haven't addressed is another factor. We're talking about 10 grand for a car as an entry level, which for someone like me sounds absolutely insane. And actually probably for many of our listeners, it sounds insane. Because I remember back in the day when you could get a really cool enthusiast car for about £3,000. I actually was alive when when the coins were still in circulation. Not.
You don't get nothing for a farthing these days. It's all right. I've got more grey hairs than Ant does.
I don't know about that. But we've got to take into account inflation. Like you talked about back in the year 2000, I quickly looked it up. In the year 2000, 25 years ago, what was £10,000 worth?
About half, I think.
Yeah, it's about 5,300 according to the Bank of England. I don't know if that's CPM or, sorry, not CPM. Whatever the two different ones, the retail price index or the consumer price index. Yeah. But either way, it's like half. So in the early 90s and late 80s, when I'm thinking about when I was young, thinking about a car and seeing cars for sale, like I think the MG Metro I used to look at all the time, I think it was like 2,750 or something when I saw it in this used car dealership back in the day. And it was in decent condition because it wasn't that old at that point in time. It was a MG Metro Turbo. Mm-hmm. Yep. And I looked at that car, I thought, oh, one day I'll be able to afford that. And, the prices over the years has just gone up and up and up and up. And not just because of the rarity, but inflation. And as we all know, over the last couple of years, inflation has been absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's gotten out of control. I think that's another part of the problem is it's not the price of the car, it is the amount of disposable cash that people have. And that's very, very unfortunate and not something I think that even this podcast can probably fix.
No.
But there is good news, everyone, because now I think people are realising what's going on. I think there are a lot of cars. We've had very, very unusual circumstances over the last 5 years that with luck will not be repeated, certainly in our lifetimes. I'm getting off this ride before it happens again, right? But there are a lot of cars that kind of had a bit of a blip, particularly in 2022 where supply was a real problem. However, now cars have sunk back down. Things are depreciating again across the market. And to be honest, I'm thinking about, for your 10 grand, I think in probably about 2 to 3 weeks' time, you can probably get a Taycan Turbo S.
You might even be able to get a Tesla.
But this is the thing, though. I know we joke, right, though, but you say, okay, there are a lot of young people growing up whose dream car is a Tesla, and certain things have gone on in the last few weeks, which I can't really fathom, but Tesla's apparently not selling very well and values are dropping, and people, for some strange reason, don't want to be associated with the brand anymore, which is odd, but, hey-ho, who am I to guess? But if you are into the Tesla thing, Model 3 performances are like, in the teens now. I'm going to say to be safe here, right? Because by the time it goes out, they're probably worth even less than they are today. But actually, again, what a lot of car. And if you want to actually, have a car, I mean, so Brian is probably going to say no and call blue murder if I present it to him. But if you want something fast, usable, capable, and not going to cost you that much to run, like a Tesla Model 3 does do all of that. No, it's not going to be the most exciting thing out there. That's your compromise. That's your compromise. It will look like every other rep's car at the expo, right? But it does a huge amount. It's not going to go pop in the way that a lot of other traditional performance cars will. So
let's hope it doesn't go pop at all, because that has some pretty dire consequences.
I'm going to save the comments section on this, and I'm going to ask for your car enthusiast card now.
No, I think the biggest crime any car enthusiast can commit is to just automatically decide there's a whole bunch of cars they don't like without having sampled them.
Yes.
Which many people do. They go, oh, EVs, I just hate them. Like, all right, okay, fine. You're not giving them a go. There's lots of valid reasons to dislike an EV, but I apply the same logic to cars as I do to people. I don't hate them until I get to know them. You've got to get to know somebody before you can take a disliking to them. You cannot judge them on anything else, or you certainly shouldn't judge them on anything else. And some of these cars have been a real pleasant surprise. And again, it's all about just working out, okay, what's interesting, what's exciting. What I'd actually really like to see, and this will probably never happen, and I mentioned it before, is a new category of car similar to what you have in, I know, the Netherlands. You get it in Germany with the quadricycles or the Fiat 500s with the narrow tires at the back, the modified ones. For aimed chiefly at young people, where you go, okay, you can have a car of, say, up to a certain weight, like 1.5 tons or so, limit the power that it can make. So 100 horsepower, 150 horsepower, something like that. Limit the top speeds. Look, the top speed of it is like 60 or 70 or whatever, which is fine because that's the motorway speed limit anyway. Make sure the acceleration is like 0 to 60 in like 12 seconds or something pedestrian. But also go, okay, and if it meets all these requirements, and it has to be a certain size, so it can't be big, and then you go, right, if you can make these cars, we'll say not charge VAT on them. And there'll be an incentive for insurance companies. And, you create a class of car, which is like your sort of first step into a vehicle.
Yeah, we need that first car. Like, so many cars now, like you look on the market and it's like a hatchback, like a Renault 5 hatchback is what, 30 grand or something like that?
Yeah,
25,
Fiat 500
30.
electric is 30 grand, yeah.
Fiat 500 electric, 30 grand. I mean, the affordable cars, and with all the safety regulations, the electronics, all of the, mandatory driver aids, etc., it's just proving almost impossible for a car to be priced at entry level anymore. So it's a real challenge. There was a car that you mentioned to me off camera that you were looking at that wasn't way outside of the budget as a car you were considering as your daily.
Yes. Yeah, this is very far off enthusiast cars.
Oh, I like it already.
As
a motorway muncher.
As a motorway muncher, it doesn't make any sense because it's far too big and it would be stupid because I currently daily a Tiguan, which does everything perfectly. But I really like the 2016 Q7.
Yeah.
I just really like the way they look, and That's literally what it is. I've never driven one. I've not been inside. I've been inside an SQ7 of that same generation, and it was really nice. It had like the carbon ceramic brakes and everything. That was a really, really, really nice.
The SQ7 is quite a cool car.
Yeah, but I just really like them. I just think that they're a lot of car. And out of curiosity, I was just flicking through Auto Trader, as we all do, looking at stuff we can't afford, and I was like, okay, let me stop looking at Aventadors and 812 Superfasts, and let me have a look at what could be my next daily. And then I had a look at it. The cheapest one on the market is 11 grand.
Ooh.
Now it did have 185,000 miles.
Yeah, it's a few, yeah.
I'm sure that there's probably quite a few issues with it. But then the next one on was about 13, and there were quite a few between the 13 and 16.
Oh, do you know what you need, young man? Do you know what you need in your life? A Phaeton. Now, come on, gents. This is bang on topic. The car built by VW to show off the might of their engineering prowess. It's basically a first-generation Bentley Continental or Flying Spur, okay, underneath.
Hang on, is this with the W?
You can get it with the W12.
W12.
The Passat got the W8, which is a hateful engine, okay? Don't buy it. Doesn't sound good, doesn't go fast, does break. Weird car. But the Phaeton, yes, you can get with the W12. Don't do that. You want to do that, don't do that. You could also get it with the 5-litre V10 diesel.
Was that the same one they had in the Touareg?
Yeah, the G50, isn't it? Whatever it's called. Yep. So, or you just get it with the 3-litre V6 diesel, which is very quickly what they realised the only engine that people actually want to buy. Yes. You can pick up a Phaeton for like 5-6 grand. Yes, we all know it can cost a bit to fix if it goes wrong, but you're mechanically minded, so you get a bit of a head start on that, and you got friends, right, who are willing to suffer. Okay, but also there are things that can go wrong that you can still live with. Right, you know, like if the boot doesn't want to go up easily and you got to help it, like that's the sort of thing that, as a young person, you can totally live with that, right?
Or if your rear electric blind breaks, who really cares?
Yeah, but as a luxury thing to sit on the motorway, a Phaeton is mighty and probably less bank breaky than like a 7 Series. Luxury barges have always depreciated, and they're one of the few cars that haven't appreciated. Again, like, see, people, you just got to follow the logic. As a young person, you want like an M3. Right? Can't have an M3. Too expensive, you couldn't insure it, right? And this is back to the insurance thing. Also, no insurance company's going to touch you, right? In an M3, because they're sensible. They're not insane. Fun fact, I knew a chap that worked for a very, very large insurance company, also known now for some of its YouTube content. And they stopped insuring TVRs because they found out that the average number of claims per policy was 1.5.
Wow.
So they just realized they were not making any money on Trevor's. So, but yeah, so you want an M3, you could get like a normal 3 Series, but even those are kind of gone up a bit in money. You know, by the time you look at affordable ones, it's like, again, you want the E46, but E90s are quite cool. I know not everybody likes them, but I do. But when I was in my early 20s, I bought a 6 Series because nobody thinks of the 6 Series. And that cost me at like 23, 24 years of age, 450 quid a year to insure. Because it all goes on claim data. Loads of young people bin 320Ds and M3s. They don't bin 645s because they don't drive them.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, another example of this is when I had my Mercedes W202 C200 compressor estate. The insurance was pennies for that because not many people in their early 20s are driving around an old Merc estate.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say not many people in their right minds were driving around in a Merc estate, but close enough.
You could also,
maybe.
And again, for real geekery petrol head points, you could get either the early Audi A8, not the first gen, but the second gen A8, or the Jaguar XJ diesel, as seen in the long distance challenges on Top Gear. Because, you know, that A8, Ben and I again the other day were watching the episode where he does the London to Edinburgh and back on a tank. And diesel, actually, I think, has almost, again, for young people, been a bit of a gift because now a huge number of people don't want to touch diesel because not ULEZ. But if you don't have to go into the ULEZ zone, or you don't go in there very often, if you actually work it out, if you went into London like 20 times a year, right? That's probably how many times I go into London. And I live close enough that I go fairly frequently. Like 20, 24 times a year, that's twice a month, right? That's 300 to 360 quid a year. versus the save. So for you Les charge versus the saving in the cost price of the car and the fuel over a year. Like, because as soon as ULEZ expanded, cars dropped by thousands of pounds, not hundreds of pounds. And yeah, if you drove in London every day, it's definitely a problem.
Which he does.
I live within the ULEZ zone, so that's...
All right, okay, so that was rubbish advice.
I did look at the
cars.
Phaeton. I really wanted it, but it's not ULEZ compliant, unfortunately.
Not even the later ones.
No, I don't think so, because everything that's diesel has to be 2016 and up.
All right, W12 it is then. It's the only sensible option.
There you go.
Can I tell you what the daily I've been thinking about? And this is such a silly car that not a lot of people think about. And I know that you've reviewed one. It's the Skoda Yeti.
Yeah.
I actually quite like that car. It's so weird and it's so quirky. And you can get the ones with the 4x4s and the 2-litre diesels. I think they're a similar engine on some aspects that they put in the VRS diesels. So you can actually map them up, just a stage one mapped to about 200 odd horsepower, and they actually go quite well. How did you find those actually drove from memory?
Like every VW product of the era, so rubbish steering, but went all right. Although, I tell you what, that is a car for life, because when your back does finally give out, you can be wheeled into the back of a Yeti quite safely. You can do a wheelchair conversion.
This is exactly it, because I've been thinking of my slammed to the floor, almost slammed, that I'm like, get out of it, and my back hurts, and I think sometimes, oh God, I'm getting old, aren't I? What's happened to me? Nope, sorry, we're sticking with the lowered Maestro. Forget the Yeti, there we go.
Yeah, okay, but so you've also got 7 Series. I had a young lad bring his 7 Series out to me the other day. He's a 19-year-old economics student, which doesn't sound like a recipe for a nearly 30-year-old. This is an E38 730i with the 3-litre V8, which is neither fast nor economical. But the whole car is not particularly expensive. We paid like $3,000 for it, and it did need some bits done, okay? But you can live with that. But it worked. It actually drove quite nicely. And insurance was £1,200 a year. You know, he found it was like, his logic was that even though he does like 20,000 miles a year because of traveling to uni and back, the added cost of the insurance would basically cover the extra cost of the fuel versus like a cooking Fiesta, not even an ST or something like that. Because again, I'd love to say, like, for young people, like a Clio 172, 182 or 197 or something like that. If you're older, yeah, of course you can insure them. It's not a problem. But if you are like 18, 19, 20, like, it's not going to happen. And sadly, the old days of buy this car, get a year's free insurance are long gone.
Have you found your insurance prices are now coming down? Now you're past 25. Are they starting to go down a bit?
Yes, 100%. They definitely started to come down. I pay just over $1,000 a year on my car, which is not awful. That's still registered in London.
Not bad.
It's not terrible, and it's definitely since I was 25 that was a lot better.
Anything London postcode for $1,000, honestly,
Yeah.
like that's pretty good.
It's pretty good. I've got all my no claims. That's all my mods declared as well. Every single one. And there's a lot done to my car. Yeah. So that was a long phone call. And he was like, "Can you list that?" No points, nothing, not a blemish on anything. So it's pretty good to be priced up like that.
So I think we're coming to the end of this episode. Any closing thoughts or on affordable entry-level cars that are enthusiast cars from you, Damani?
Yes, I have a thought and I have a question for the whole room, actually. My thought is everyone is probably quite similar to me. If you're into cars, you at one point, you're quite young and impulsive and reckless. Try and listen to the people older than you and get the sensible thing, because they will cause you pain. Having a rotary in uni was one of the stupidest ideas I've ever had. It cost me a lot of money. Then when I ran out of money, it cost my dad a lot of money.
Just for those that are not watching, I can currently see another grey hair forming landscape as the memories are flooding back.
But there are some great bargains out there and stuff that people really love. I think the main thing is broaden your horizons. Very, very brief origin story. wanted an FDRX7, long time been my dream car, really, really wanted one. Couldn't afford one at the time. So then that sparked a thought, let me just have a look at RX-8. So I was really numb to them. I didn't really know anything about them. Didn't realize they were so cheap. Soon found out why. And they weren't actually that awful on insurance. And I could afford to make it work at the time. And I've now fallen in love with that car to the point where my one that I have today is never leaving my garage. So yeah, broaden your horizons. You may end up having something as a stepping stone, but you may also find a car that you didn't realize you would love for the rest of your life.
I think that's fantastic advice, actually. So many times you can go out there with something in your mind and then perhaps test drive or see or look at other cars, and that ends up being the one for you.
And then the question that I had is, I think I'm not a huge Porsche guy, but I know 90% of the car world are huge Porsche people. So I don't know too much about them. But as this email that you were talking about earlier, he stated he wanted to receive the same or feel the same excitement he got from driving a 997.1. What is a good entry-level Porsche? I know the Boxers are great. And how much do Boxers and Caymans, can you get them for sub 10?
So I'm actually doing a video on this very topic where what I'm going to say is, if you want a cheap Porsche, the one and only choice effectively is a 987 Boxster or Boxster S, like my friend Chris has, with the 3.2 litre engine specifically. The reason for that being, I love the 986 to pieces, but it's of an age now. They're expensive to keep going. Okay, I found this out the hard way. The 987, much more youthful car, feels a lot nicer inside. Is just this. It's the same platform. It's just a heavy facelift, right? But they're a little bit more youthful, a little bit less miles. 10 grand will get you into a good example. Like 12 to 13 get you into a very good example. Not hideously expensive to keep going. Obviously a step up from your average hot hatches and whatnot, but not a big step up. The reason I state the 3.2 or the regular Boxster is that the 3.2 certainly was the last and the largest engine that doesn't suffer bore score. So it is not impossible, but it is highly unlikely to need an engine rebuild, which would, of course, cost you the value of the car, at least. They do suffer a couple of other issues. IMS, I think, is less of a problem by this, but that's also something you can sort out for much, much less money. But yeah, they're probably that sweet spot of like, if you want something, anything better than that doesn't have these potential big issues, you probably got to spend like double the money. Because again, first generation Caymans, they'll suffer. The Cayman had the 3.4 from the off, and the 3.4, they changed the engine design, and that's when they introduced some of the big bore score problems. And again, like a 911, again, you used to be able to get one for sub 10 grand. You can still now, but it's going to be a car that's pre-knackered and also still carries the spectre of big issues. And if you're buying cars at that end of the market and you don't have spare money, like just avoid. And also cheap Cayenne, no such thing. Panamera, again, like I don't think they've got that cheap yet, and also they're going to cost a fortune to run. I also wouldn't recommend the transaxle cars like 924, 944, 968. Yes, you can get them, some of them for sub 10 grand, but they're really expensive cars to keep running, like much more so than you possibly think. Again, because they were cheap for a long time, and they've become of an age where I've spoken with friends and they've had much newer, more exotic cars that were cheaper to run than like their 3 grand 944. So yeah, Porsches, that's what I'd say.
Oh, I just want to say it's been a pleasure to actually finally meet you, Damani, and it's been really nice to hear you and your dad chat, and I can see that you could almost blindfold me and I wouldn't know who I'm talking to in many regards. You guys are so similar. It's like, it's uncanny. And it's just really lovely to see the relationship you guys have got, especially when it comes to cars and hearing all the stories. And it's just great. I just enjoy seeing it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to meet you as well. Pleasure to finally be on the podcast as well.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you'll be back.
Yeah, I'd love to be. And yeah, me and my dad, we're not just father and son, we're like best mates. So not like best mates, we are best mates.
Bless your sickening hearts. But that is also the other thing, as a final parting word from me, like a copper, I always have to get the last word in. There is always this sort of feeling when you're younger that like, it would only be better if you had a better car. But actually, if you've got a car and a level of enthusiasm, like any decent car meet that I would go to, you should be welcome at too. Like, no car meet should ever turn somebody down for appearing in like their mum's micro or whatever, because the fact is, like, us petrol heads, we are a little bit of a dying breed, and so nobody should ever feel shame at turning up to a car meet in whatever it is that they can get their hands on. And trust me, that thing that when you're 18, 19, you might feel so desperately uncool for driving, when you're 40 or 50, you would trade body parts to have that car back, because ultimately it's the memories attached to the car that really mean something. No 18-year-old will ever believe me. Every 80-year-old knows it's true. So with that said, thank you everybody for joining us on this week's installment of The Radiator Arms. Don't forget to subscribe here at JM and Friends on YouTube, or listen, if you like, on Amazon Podcasts, Apple Music, if we can get the darn thing working properly, and Spotify. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.